Hello students and welcome to biology class. In our class today we shall be discussing the topic Introduction to Genetics. Genetics is the study of heredity and variation. When we say heredity, we are talking about the process of passing traits or characteristics from parents to their offspring. When we talk about variation, we are talking about the differences that occur in organisms of the same species. Genetics is a field of biology that studies how traits are passed from parents to their offspring. We have often seen resemblances between parents and their offspring. Genetics explains the reason for these resemblances. Genetics is built around a biological molecule known as the DNA. DNA molecules are known to hold all the genetic information for an organism. It provides cells with the information they need to perform tasks that allow them to grow, survive, and reproduce. So everything about the life of an organism is controlled by information that is contained or that is held by the DNA molecules. And they are the molecules that are passed from generations to generations for organisms to retain their structure, their look, their appearance, and their functions. DNA is one of the 4 molecules of life, besides carbohydrate, protein, lipids. It is one of the essential molecules that an organism must possess. In fact, every organism must have these 4 molecules, like protein, carbohydrate, lipids, and nucleic acid, that is the DNA. So DNA holds all the information about an organism, and it allows this organism to pass the information to its offspring or its generations. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. A DNA molecule is a nucleic acid that comes in the form of a long linear molecule referred to as a strand. There are 2 strands in a DNA molecule. Each of these 2 strands are held together by nitrogenous bases, which include adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. These nitrogenous bases hold the 2 strands of a DNA to form what is known as the DNA double helix structure. A portion or segment of a DNA molecule is known as a gene. A gene holds the information for one specific protein. Since we know that DNA molecules contain all the information about the structure, function, color, and everything about an organism, certain segments of it are referred to as genes, and each gene holds information for one specific protein. As we know, proteins are the building blocks of life. The structure of an organism, starting from the cells, are built from proteins. So the structures, functions, colors, and other characteristics of the body of an organism are determined by genes, because these genes are the ones that determine the proteins that are involved in building these structures, these colors, these functions, and other things like that. For example, in our body, we have hormones, we have cells. All these are built from proteins. So invariably, we can say that genes are responsible for all the characteristics that are passed from one generation of organism to the next. So all traits in the body are responsible for by genes. So genes are the ones responsible for the transmission of traits or characteristics from parents to their offsprings, and genes are a portion of the DNA molecule that holds information about a particular protein. For example, our red blood cells, the hemoglobin in our cell is a protein. So there is a particular gene that is responsible for this protein. Our hormones are of different types. Each hormone type is a protein. So there is a protein for each hormone type in our body. Our hair is made of protein. So there is a gene that is coding for a particular type of hair. That's why I have straight hair, curly hair, the color are different. So all these are determined by genes. Chromosomes. A chromosome is a structure made from tightly packed strands of DNA and proteins called histones. Chromosomes are known to hold information about an organism, but chromosomes themselves are made up of two components. They are made up of DNA molecules or DNA strands and a particular protein known as histones. So the DNA molecules are wound around the protein histones to form a structure called chromatids. On a normal day, a cell that is not dividing has what is called chromatids, that are single strands of worm-like structures located in the nucleus of the cell. So during cell division, these chromatids replicate to form a copy of themselves, and they are joined together along their length at a point called centrosome or centromere. So at this point, we have a structure looking like letter X, which we usually refer to as the chromosomes. So chromosomes are formed from DNA strands that have been wound around a protein known as histone to form what is called chromatids. And when these chromatids replicate to become double, and they are held together in the middle at a point along their length, refer to them as chromosomes. Chromosomes can only be seen when a cell is dividing. We only see chromosomes as a structure of a cell or as a component of cells during cell division. They are only formed when cells are about to divide. Now, every organism has a particular number of chromosomes in a cell. For example, some organisms have just only 2. We have those that have up to hundreds or more than that. But for a human being, every human cell has 46 number of chromosomes. These 46 number of chromosomes are inherited from both parents. That is, half of it, 23, from the mother and the remaining 23 from the father. Genes as units of heredity. We have explained earlier that genes are portion of the DNA. And we know that DNA winds up to form chromosomes. So a portion of DNA or a portion of chromosomes are genes. So genes are the basic unit of heredity because they are the ones responsible for the transmission of specific protein that determine a particular trait or function in an organism. So the genes of an individual are determined by their parent or parents. We don't form genes in our body, we get them from our parents. For the case of a single cell organism, which is a single parent that divides to form 2 daughter cells, all the genes in these 2 daughter cells, as we have seen in the case of mitosis, which is just representing a cell divided into two daughter cells. All the genes in the two daughter cells come from the parent cell that divided. In the case of sexual reproduction, when we have two parents involved, the genes of the offspring produced through that process are gotten from the two parents. In the case of humans, we are products of egg cell from our mother and sperm cell from our father. Our fathers produced the sperm cells, our mothers produced the egg cells. So the egg cells and the sperm cells both have 23 number of chromosomes. So by the time the egg cell and the sperm cells come together during fertilization, a new organism is formed with a total number of 46 chromosomes. But what you have to understand is that for each trait we inherit from our parent, we have two copies of each of genes representing each trait. These genes might be the same and they might be different. Since we get half of our chromosome from our father and half of our chromosome from our mother. And we should also understand that all the traits of a human being are contained in the 23 chromosomes we got from our father, and all the traits of a human being are also contained in the 23 chromosomes we got from our mother. Meaning, in an individual that has been produced through sexual reproduction, he or she will have two copies of genes for each trait he has inherited. Let's say, for example, in the case of eye color, we must have inherited the gene for eye color from our father and also the gene for eye color from our mother. These genes might be the same or they might be different depending on the characteristics our father has or the characteristics that our mother has for eye color. So in case sometimes we inherit the same types of gene for a particular trait from each parent, sometimes these genes are different. So when we have different forms of the same gene, we call them alleles. So for each gene, a human has two copies. Although in the practical sense of it, in the real sense of it, sometimes there are more than two. But for proper understanding of what we are trying to discuss, let's limit them to two. That is, we must have taken one from our mother and the other one from the father. So, for each gene a human can have, two different alleles or two of the same alleles. So you can have the same alleles. Remember, alleles is the term used to refer to as genes, especially when they are different from each other. But the term is usually used interchangeably with the word gene. The normal interaction between alleles is the case of dominant and recessive relationship. An allele of a gene or a trait is said to be dominant when it effectively overrules the other allele and is expressed in the phenotype. What do I mean by this? An individual has inherited different alleles for a particular trait from the two parents. One of these two alleles will determine the outward appearance or the phenotype of the individual. So the allele that determines the outward appearance of the individual is referred to as the dominant allele or dominant gene because it has overruled the other allele, which is now referred to as the recessive allele. So whenever we have two contrasting genes or alleles from our parents, let's say, for example, for skin color, there is a gene for skin color that is called the normal gene for normal skin color, and there is another one that code for abnormal skin color. We know of individuals that don't have the pigment, that the protein melanin in their skin. We call them albinos. They have inherited this trait from their parents. So we have an allele for skin color that codes for normal skin color pigmentation, and we have another that codes for abnormal skin color, which is called albinism. So in the case of an individual that has inherited the allele for normal skin color, let's say from the mother, and inherited the allele for abnormal skin color from the father, one of these two genes will determine which one is going to determine the color of the skin of the individual. But we should also understand that there are some alleles that are naturally dominant. In the case of skin color, the normal skin color pigmentation, or the allele for normal skin color pigmentation, is dominant in man. So whenever it is present, even if the individual has inherited the other allele for abnormal skin color, the one for normal skin color will dominate. So that is referred to as the dominant allele. So an allele or a gene is said to be dominant when it effectively overrules the other allele and it's expressed in the phenotype. Example of this can be seen in the allele for brown eye and the allele for blue eye. Naturally, the allele for brown eye is always dominant, while the allele for blue eye is recessive. So if an individual has inherited the allele for blue eye from one of his parents and the allele for brown eye from the other parent, the allele for blue eye will be dominant. It's always dominant over the allele for brown eye is always dominant over that of the blue eye color. So the individual is going to have, or the offspring is going to have, brown eye. So for a person to have a particular phenotype, he must have inherited traits or genes to determine that phenotype. So in the case of the brown eye and blue eye we have talked about, you see some individual with brown eye and some with blue eyes, as in the case among the white people. So the allele for blue eye is recessive and the allele for brown eye is naturally dominant. So whenever the brown eye allele is present in an individual, it's going to determine the phenotype of the individual. That is, the individual will have brown eye, although it's carrying the allele for the blue eye. It should also be noted that in genetics, we represent dominant alleles with a capital letter, and we represent the allele for recessive represent recessive alleles with a small letter. So in the case of an individual that has inherited the allele for brown eye and an allele for blue eye, this genotype for that trait, that's for eye color, can be written as capital letter B and small letter b. That is, the capital letter B is representing the dominant allele, which is for the brown eye color, and the small letter b is representing the allele for the blue eye color. Such individual can also have the two alleles being for brown, so it's still going to have the brown color of eye. So what we want to just bring out of this is that whenever you have the dominant alleles present, the recessive one will have to will remain silent. So the dominant one will determine the outward look or phenotype of the offspring. A dominant allele always produces a dominant phenotype whenever it is present. So whether the individual has one copy of it or both copies. For an individual with two recessive alleles, because recessive alleles can come together. Let's say, for example, a parent is an albino and the other parent is a carrier of the albino gene, and one of their offspring receive the two alleles for albinism, that is recessive alleles for skin pigmentation from both parents. So such individual will come down with what? Albinism. So for a person to be an albino, for example, he must have inherited the recessive alleles from both parents. So it should be noted that for an individual to come down with a recessive trait, for example, now for an individual to have blue color or have abnormal skin pigmentation, that is being an albino, he or she must have received or inherited only the recessive alleles from both parents. Now, instead for a recessive allele to produce a recessive phenotype, the individual must have two copies of the recessive alleles, one from each parent. An individual with one dominant and one recessive alleles for a gene or trait will have the dominant phenotype, because once the dominant allele is present, it's going to determine the phenotype, irrespective of whether the recessive trait is present or not. As long as we have the dominant allele, it's going to determine the phenotype of the individual. So when we speak of inheritance of alleles or genetic makeup of an organism with respect to a particular trait, we usually talk of an individual being homozygous for a trait or heterozygous for a trait. An individual is described as homozygous if the two alleles he has inherited for a particular trait are the same, whether they are both dominant traits or they are both recessive traits. As long as an individual has the same alleles for a particular trait in his body, the person or the individual is described as being homozygous for that trait. So it may be capital letter or small letter. So capital letter means both genes he has inherited or alleles he has inherited from both parents are the same and they are both dominant. You can use the small letters if the alleles he has inherited from both parents are small letters. So as long as the individual has the same kind of allele for a particular trait from both parents, we describe that individual as being homozygous for that particular trait. Also, an individual is described as being heterozygous for a trait if the two alleles he has inherited or he possesses in his genotype for a particular trait are different. That is, one of them is dominant, the other one is recessive. We say is heterozygous for that trait. So these are the basic terms that we need to understand in the study of genetics. So in subsequent lessons on genetics, this will form our foundation, because we refer to these terms, talk about gene, chromosomes, talk about homozygous, heterozygous, talk about alleles. So this will serve as our foundation for our study of genetics. So until we meet again in our other classes,